Hello dear friends, today is the 21st of June, Saturday, approximately 22 hours 30 minutes in Washington time. The speech has just ended. The idea of the speech was an emergency statement of President Trump about the blow that was delivered by American bombers, bombs, and rockets to three main objects of the Iranian nuclear program. The blow, it should be said, the day before yesterday, or rather about the inevitability of this blow, was reported to me by my son, who brought the news that in the American armed forces, in the strike groups that will participate in some special operations, a special lunch is served on the eve of the blow. Lobster and steak. Who does not know, lobster here is a large tail of amaranth. This is about how during the Second World War some were given schnapps, others were given vodka before serious battles. According to Trump's statement, Iran's nuclear program was destroyed, all three objects. The well-known ones outside Trump's speech were strategically destroyed. Americans made a strategic deception. The planes I told you about are six. They flew in different directions. Some flew to the west. I told you about them. They flew through Hawaii, then to Guam, and then, in theory, they had to fly to Diego Garcia. But there were three others who flew from the state of Missouri to the east. The first one had to fly about 30 hours to Diego Garcia and the other 15 hours. And so these two, they made this blow about 2 hours, 2.3 at night, as Iran's television reported about it. The blow was applied in the following way. There are entrances and exits, that is, there at first. Hit a couple at each entrance or exit, hit the bomb that he was talking about, GBU 57. As the depth where this main object is located now is 300 feet, divide by 3. That is 100 meters. This rocket penetrates 200 feet, that is, about 70 groups of meters, and forms a funnel. Or rather, not a funnel, but such a hole with a diameter of about 8 meters. Then, in this hole, the second bomb hits the hole for sure. You can imagine some kind of accuracy. In a hole with a diameter of 8 meters, a bomb hits, which itself, I don't remember which one, but it is large, large, large in size, and it goes further, deeper. It is assumed that it was supposed to reach this necessary depth of 100 meters, but the most important thing, as it turned out, according to calculations, there are 2 ventilation shafts. So each of these ventilation shafts was hit, thrown down by 3 bombs. After that, visual reconnaissance or some kind of electronic reconnaissance showed, and that's what Trump, his social network, spoke to. Ford is gone, Ford is destroyed. No less serious hit was applied to the Natanz and Isfahan objects. About Isfahan, so much was not said about Ford, but it turns out that there is a special uranium, some kind of special fuel. Again, they are physics nuclear in general, exactly that without which it is impossible to make an atomic bomb, and it is also located at the depth. These 2 objects were hit by 30 Tomahawk rockets, which were launched from the underwater boats of the Agai class. This operation was prepared under the leadership of the commander of the Kurilla SCTCOM, about whom I told you in the previous video, who swore that everything would go without a beep and without a mess. And I must say, he kept his word. Everything was done masterfully. as analysts and specialists say, such operations are usually prepared for 20 days. Kurilla prepared them for 2 weeks. And the most important thing is that this strategic deception would be impossible if at least someone talked. And a miracle happened, no leaks, no words, no hints. The hardest thing was to hold Trump. He at least twice rushed to make a statement to communicate with journalists. He was held, apparently, by the hands and by the legs. He did not do this. There were 2 leaks, by and large. These are not leaks. These were intelligence signs. The first one, I don't remember whether I told you or not, about a week, maybe more. It was found that the pizzerias around Pentagon in the evening sharply increased orders for pizza. Previously, this was not observed. This is the first, and the second is this lunch, lobster and steak. Everything else was covered in a misty curtain. Then a false group of B-2s flew to the west, but most importantly flew to the east and delivered this blow. It must be said that Trump especially noted that he made such an accent for him that this is not a request from Israel, which the United States of America has now made, although it was an irreparable example of cooperation between them and Netanyahu. He congratulated and thanked God for this, but most importantly, it was noted that this is nothing like any armed force in the modern world. The United States is the most powerful state. The pride is back. The pride is back. And already beyond, so to speak, this Trump's performance. One of the Fox correspondents of the Fox channel said that Putin is surely spending a sleepless night at the TV, watching the events that are taking place. He noted this in particular, and you know, the Fox channel is close to the White House. I don't know if this thesis was agreed with the White House. As usual, the thesis with the Kremlin is agreed on half the memories. I don't know, but it was noted in particular on the TV of Israel, one of the speakers. I missed his last name, but judging by the look of it, he was a veteran, a well-deserved soldier of the Israel Defense Force, who hinted at the colossal role of artificial intelligence, which the United States Armed Forces used in planning and carrying out this operation. He noted a new level of planning and carrying out similar operations in the United States of America. This is what I am talking about. Well, now what, Americans? Trump said after that. Everyone repeats here. Americans consider their mission completed. They want to imagine it as a single blow, simply, and that's it. They stopped at that. If only Iran does not take responsible actions in the form of terrorist actions, shelling, attack on bases, and so on. There are fears. All the forces are now abandoned to protect, to ensure the safety of 40,000 American servicemen, which are located at numerous American bases in the Middle East. One of the representatives of the government was announced on Iranian television. Iran announced, addressing Trump, "Mr. President Trump, you started this case. I mean, they were involved in war with us, but we will finish it." And at the same time, he showed the map of the location of military facilities of the United States in the region. That's it. On this occasion, Trump and other representatives of the Fox channel, which spreads the theses of the White House, reinforced, spend the whole evening with the idea that let's finish this business. That is, everything. You have lost your nuclear objects, but not because On the other hand, these objects were threatening us Americans, and this is for you for everything, pay for everything. And starting with the overthrow of the chess, but not so much chess, but the capture of the American embassy, which followed after that. This is the humiliation of the United States. Then there was an attempt at Carter's liberation. A special operation that did not succeed. From this fell the Carter administration, that is, it was not re-elected for the second term. Then numerous terrorist actions followed, they were listed. In his speech, Trump especially stopped at General Suleiman, who organized the spread of these bombs, the infantry mines that deprived American soldiers many, about 1,000, he counted them. And here, in total, this terrorist activity of Iran, this blow of retribution was inflicted. And thus, one of the leading representatives of the Fox channel, who personally has a good relationship with Trump, formulated a new doctrine of Trump, said did, thus Trump. Like one of the goals, so persistently this thought was carried out and this slogan was repeated. It seemed that one of the important goals of this operation was to break this story about Taco that in the end will drift. Now it sounds like Trump said, Trump did, and this should be known to everyone. Well, the Congress, well, you can't say that it is angry, so to speak, in its own mass, but since, of course, the White House can say that it was just such a one-time action, but Iran believes that this is the introduction of the United States into a war against it. American newspapers write about this. The New York Times wrote about it. The Wall Street Journal, by and large, wrote about it. No, not the Wall Street Journal, but the Atlantic edition, and this requires the consent of Congress. It was not given. Some senators, Republicans, because I'm not talking about Democrats, the Republicans expressed themselves very harshly and sharply. Senator Thomas Massie, let's say, called this action the beginning of another idiotic war. No more, no less, Trump got involved in another idiotic war. Well, I told you there were so many examples. Here, even for the Americans, it is not necessary to repeat. That is, there was not, I do not count, not a single war that the United States took part in after the Second World War which would have ended victory. That is, it was all a unique war, all operations in them they. United States won. Vietnamese did not lose a single battle. Korean did not lose a single battle. In Afghanistan did not lose anything, defeated in 2 weeks a serious army of Saddam Hussein. Before that it fought for several months. I do not remember how many, I think, almost a year. I do not remember exactly. There was a war between Iran and Iraq. More than 1 million people were killed on each side. I do not take the order, it was a long time ago, but a huge number of people were literally going there in the waves, cannon fodder. The United States solved the issue, performed a brilliant mission, reported for 2 weeks, that's it, and after that it just started. Now what is happening is the result of the victorious war. 2 weeks in the United States when President Bush was younger against Saddam Hussein. Therefore, there is such a fear that it will all begin now. Experts in Israel and in the United States say that the statement that the nuclear program of Iran is over is slightly exaggerated and very premature. In order to say this, first of all, it is necessary to find about 400 kilograms of enriched uranium up to 60, they even say more. Percent, that is, it is already enough to produce up to 10 atomic bombs, in my opinion, or find them or install where they went, because if it seems that they were not destroyed there, they were not buried, and now for this you need to get there, then you will have to run all over the globe with horror, assuming that it can be in the hands of terrorists. I will remind them, and most likely I will tell you because most of you probably don't know that the biggest headache of the United States, especially in the military circles in the first half of the 90s, and then until the end of the 90s. Let's say there was a question of where the portable nuclear weapon of the Soviet Union was made. Part of this weapon, as General Lebedь said once publicly, who used authority and respect here, I don't know, he just clapped like that to scare people. Indeed, he said that they exist almost in the form of such portable explosive devices, almost like suitcases or big backpacks, and they were in the order of the special forces. Then they told me that some of them were in the territory of Ukraine in the corresponding military units before the special forces. They called me a part of a special mission in the Odessa region in particular. It was the most terrible thing for the Americans. Well, now it turns out a situation, if they don't find this in the outskirts of Fordow, then it means you have to look for it, and where to look for it, I mean that, as I told you, Sears is a sprout. It's not even the Basi party in Saddam Hussein. Then Al-Quds, it's an international, huge, terrorist professional organization. And all this will need to be found and taken into account, as they say, and control, otherwise there will be no peace. Well, and finally, a very important thought was published in the Atlantic edition. This is the Intellectuals magazine in the United States of America. And there, such a thought was expressed that this action or war is the end of democracy. Well, not quite the end, but a great threat to the end of democracy and the establishment of a dictatorial regime in the United States of America. The article says that, well, just think about it. Trump has led an extraordinary position in the fight against some mythical gangs that do not exist. From Venezuela, and now, in fact, Iran says that there is a war. The newspapers write that there is a war. He is now announcing the emergency situation all over the country, and everything will be closed, everything will be turned over. And when he turns it all over, God will reveal to one God. Already now, according to the testimony of the author of the article, he established unilateral control over the law enforcement agencies. They are now subordinate to neither the people, according to the procedure and the existing procedure, as they called it, deep state. There was no deep state. It was the structure of a democratic state, where the director of the FBI could send the president. If he ordered him to do illegal activities, the same thing could be done by the Minister of Defense. Now this is practically impossible. Then he mentioned that the army can now become, in any case, separate units that will feed lobster and steak for lunch. They can become personal units, so to speak, like the Saddam Hussein Guard. Something like this can occur in the United States of America. Congress is actually suppressed now since Trump has the majority. And as they say, what did he take from Congress? He took the right to dispose of money. The state budget, that is, now he will squeeze everything out of Congress and as much as he wishes in theory. Let's see how it all works out. These are, so to speak, the most gloomy thoughts. But in practice, in general, in essence, they testify that when the war begins, rights and freedoms, they, as a rule, well, almost in all countries, are rolled up. And if this process had started before, then the whole question is whether this participation in this military or semi-military operation, or the beginning of the war, was intended for this purpose. It reminds me of what you remember, as Trump said in the midst of the election campaign. Vote for me, maybe these are the last elections that you will have to vote for. So the news, or rather not the news, but the Fox channel, it's getting popular. I don't know, or maybe not even the Fox channel, but some bright representatives who are personally close to President Trump. But I didn't notice any joy in the eyes of the others, not to mention other channels. Such a situation, gentlemen, exists at this moment, and all this, the only thing that pleased me, is a hint that Putin is probably now having a sleepless night with intense attention, looking at what the Americans have done. Of course, no such thing can be done. The Russian second so-called world army can't do it, and in light of these events, as Grant wrote, Fordow is off the table. I see the perspective of the title Kremlin is off the table, or Putin's bunker is erased from the face of the earth and no longer exists. Well, probably if Putin really watched, the person is impressive, probably such thoughts wandered in his head. That's it, dear friends, let me finish today's long working day on Saturday. And as always, well, in any situation there is something negative, but there is also something positive. I would immediately find something positive, but I will not even prepare for this. I will name the first one. This is the fact that they paid attention to the artificial intelligence and its application in the United States of America. And Ukraine and the United States of America are now, in principle, in the same boat. Well, a slightly different level, of course, but in principle, very close. Ukraine even has a more large-scale application of the use of artificial intelligence integrally. And not in one particular operation, but in general in the course of combat actions. That is, quite quickly, and this is a big step forward. We hope that it will help Ukraine achieve victory in its fair fight against the aggressor. Next, I think that in Europe, the vast majority of countries in NATO and the European Union will be in solidarity with the thoughts that were laid out in the Atlantic edition. And they will make the appropriate conclusions, and they will understand that it is, first of all, a question of their own national security. Ukraine, the union of Ukraine, and the provision of Ukraine with weapons and resources necessary to carry out military actions. That's it, dear friends. Let me finish this video. As always, glory to Ukraine and the armed forces. The enemy will be defeated. The victory will be ours. To you, dear friends, endurance, courage, and firm faith in our inevitable victory. See you soon.